Who do you see as Patriot fits when you were up close with all these guys for 4 or 5 practices?
So I admittedly spent a lot of time looking at receivers because I do think that is, while there's a lot of pressing questions, including offensive tackle and cornerback, to me, wide receivers is both the most fun to watch and figure out, but it's also just, frankly, I think the most pressing. You need to make a decision on Mac Jones and his 5th-year option after this upcoming season. You've given him a real offensive coordinator. Now the last step is you need to give him weapons. Just re-signing Jakobi Meyers is not enough, and that is no given either. So back to the well you go, I think, for an early wide receiver, whether it's first round or beyond. I think you kind of have to come away with a wide receiver on day 1 or 2. So in that vein, Zay Flowers was the best one here. He didn't do a ton because he does not want to get hurt. He wants to be around the Patriots coaches and in the meetings, and by all accounts did very well, but he only practiced 1 time, and it was basically because every cornerback here wants to show that, in his words, they can shut him down. And so it's going to be a little extra grabbing and hand fighting and just play it safe, don't get injured. So he was the best one here, but didn't do a whole lot. After that, I think a really interesting option is A.T. Perry from Wake Forest. A bigger body, which I think the Patriots could use. We don't know what's going to happen with Nelson. Well, we kind of know what's going to happen with Nelson Aguilar. He's probably going to sign elsewhere. I don't know that Devontae Parker is just a shoo-in to return. And so regardless, I do think that you could use a bigger body receiver. You've got ideally Tyquan Thornton developing as your downfield guy. You've got potentially, if he resigns, Jakobi Meyers underneath. You could use more of a possession receiver. And I think that is what Perry provides. He's 6'5", but he's not like a stiff, can't run route 6'5". T. Higgins is too high of a compliment, but kind of a poor man's T. Higgins. So he jumped out. There's a Florida receiver, Justin Shorter, who had a couple of big plays. Troy Brown worked with a ton and was often with him and chest bumping him after some plays. Fun to see Troy Brown kind of bring back the Swift. He ran 40 yards downfield to go celebrate with him, and he looks like he could still return a punt if you needed him to.
Troy's jacked. Troy's ripped. Every time we talk to Troy, even over Zoom, I'm like, GD, I need to get back to the gym. Like, the man might be in better shape than he was at the end of his career. It's unbelievable.
It's insane. He's crazy. I'll give you, I guess, a couple more. Liberty receiver Demario Douglas, super small, shifty slot guy that I think you could use whether or not you resign Jakobi Meyers. Like, if you do, great, have him learn behind him. If not, I think he's a guy who could develop into that role that the Patriots have been so good at and ran, frankly, so well when Bill O'Brien was last year, with Wes Welker leading the league in receptions, targets, yards, whatever else he did. And then, we talked a little bit about the running backs. Minnesota running back Mohamed Ibrahim, who put up massive numbers in college. I was impressed with not just that, with his running style, which I think is well documented, playing in the Big Ten in cold weather and putting up tons of yards. He's got good hands and ran decent routes. And I don't know that he's like a true scat back that the Patriots may want, depending on if they choose that role and what happens with Montgomery. But somebody like that, I think, is interesting, almost in like a Ramondre Stevenson role of, good ball carrier, but this is a guy who can pass block and catch some passes too. I didn't spend a ton of time watching safety, but I don't know about you. That to me is safety and tight end are kind of like the positions to me that are super interesting as potential Patriots fits that are not like on the same level as wide receiver, cornerback, offensive tackle, but spots that good teams would be looking at the future of that position, developing somebody to come in there, knowing, who knows what's going to happen with Jonnu Smith a year from now, or Hunter Henry this year or a year from now, or Adrian Phillips.
Let's stay with tight ends, because this ties into some of the guys that were there. And one of your other colleagues at The Athletic, Nate Tice, tweeted about Jack Coletto from Oregon State, who also played some fullback. And I took note of this because, as we both watched and knew last year, the Patriots got rid of the fullback position. This was a one-back offense in every single iteration, and they asked Jonnu Smith, can you pop back in the backfield for some lead runs or some split zone? And okay, that's fine. It doesn't count. But Coletto is a hybrid player that could bring back some of those two-back concepts. And your colleague Nate Tice from The Athletic brought up as someone who's versatile, had some ball skills, could unlock some more of that creativity, not, a Kyle Juszczyk out in San Francisco, but something similar. Did Coletto pop to you at all?
A little bit. I think anybody who is in that role automatically gets paired to Kyle Juszczyk just because he's so good and got paid and was kind of the only one to do that. So I think teams would be wise to look for that. I think it will be telling if they go out and find a guy like that of a little bit more of what Bill O'Brien is looking for. I do think whether it's him or somebody else, I don't know what you think, but you need another tight end. You've got two on the roster, so for sure need another one. But just knowing that the Josue Smith thing hasn't really worked out like you hoped when you signed him. Next year is the year that you can more easily get out of that. This feels like a good opportunity to choose a day 3 tight end, somebody that you can develop. They're your third tight end this year, 4th or 5th round, something like that. And then if they play great or begin to develop, awesome. You've got your number 2 tight end next season. If they don't, no sweat. It was a 5th round pick. We'll go look for somebody else. So I really think that they'll be going that route. One oddity, I guess, is that was the only position for the Patriots that they did not assign a position coach. They just had them either work in with receivers or Bill O'Brien would pop by and help, but they didn't have a position coach for tight end, which is a little bit odd. Perhaps just because they didn't have as many people on staff when you don't have an offensive line coach and a tight end coach maybe up in the air. Maybe it was a numbers thing. Maybe you can read more into it, but they did not have a tight ends coach here for coaching the Shrine Bowl.
Yeah, and that comes back to Nick Caley, obviously the Patriots tight end. His contract is set to expire. Interviewed for the Jets offensive coordinator job. The Patriots job didn't get either of them. His future seems to be uncertain. He's 40 now. His name has been floated a lot, even on this podcast by myself and other people. I'm not sure how much interest there is for a larger role. Obviously, those interviews are a good sign, but when you look at the production from that position the last few years, like you just talked about Josue Smith being a real downer, maybe he didn't want him on the roster or was involved in the free agency decision because before Josue Smith got here, was heralded, including by yours truly, as just kind of underlying analytics like the separation is really good. He breaks tackles. Yeah, he's never topped 500 yards in a season, but it's coming. Never did. Totally whiffed. So I don't know if that was more than just, hey, Nick's not going to come. We'll just figure it out while we're there. Or maybe that's a position like we talked about with offensive line that they might need to address moving forward. So I think it's a larger conversation later on, but I think it's interesting that they did opt not to slide anyone in there because it's also a complicated position. But if you're one of those tight ends at the Shrine Bowl, you're like, I would like to be coached. I would not like to be treated as a receiver or a part-time tight end. Like, what the heck?
Yeah, it was an interesting situation because they would basically either be an offensive lineman or a wide receiver, and there wasn't much. Just, hey, you do your own thing here, and it's just a spot that fascinates me, along with safety for the Patriots this offseason. So
yeah. You mentioned safety.
Those
decisions, I think, starts with Devin McCourty, right? Does he retire? Does he not? Even if he does, I don't think he comes back and plays 98% of the defensive snaps like we've become accustomed to. They were limiting him a little bit towards the end of the year, but he could re-sign for 1 year. They could bring back Jabril Peppers, who I think proved he was a real fit, even as someone who had the experience in Patrick Graham's system in New York. And obviously he's built like a box safety. I mean, he's built like a box. Forget the safety part. He's absolutely rocked up. But we'll save that for another day. For more, check out the full episode of the Pats Interference Podcast and CLNS Media's Patriots Press Pass YouTube page, or listen on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. The Pats Interference Podcast is powered by Athletic Greens. Build a foundation for better health with AG1.